Mes a mí, muchísimas gracias por venir a sentaros en la butaca barata. Hoy os traigo el episodio más especial hasta el día de hoy porque es mi primera entrevista con un cantante de ópera. Efectivamente, yo desde que se me ocurrió la idea de hacer este podcast quería hacer entrevistas, porque ya sabéis que a mí lo que más me fascina son los engranajes de las cosas, los procesos creativos, cómo se hacen las cosas. Entonces, la idea de poder entrevistar a alguien y preguntarle cómo es ese proceso me parece delicioso. Así que estoy contentísimo de que esta primera entrevista además sea con Anthony Roth Costanzo, un contratenor súper famoso, buenísimo, o sea, un talento increíble que además vi literalmente hace un mes en el Teatro Real en Partenope en uno de los papeles principales, o sea que te puedo decir yo de primera mano que este chaval es buenísimo. Además es una persona LGTB, una persona que no solamente ha cantado ópera, sino que ha cantado un montón de estilos, que ha hecho muchas colaboraciones con otros artistas y que además es contratenor, que es la voz de hombre más alta y es una voz muy peculiar que poca gente tiene. Entonces me parecía muy interesante tener su perspectiva y a mí me ha parecido fascinante, al menos desde aquí dentro. Antes de poneros la entrevista, quiero decir que la entrevista es en inglés, porque él, aunque habla un poco de castellano, porque ya sabéis que la gente de la ópera habla 346 idiomas, no se sentía tan cómodo haciéndolo en castellano porque no habla tanto, así que lo hemos hecho en inglés. Pero yo creo que es una persona que se comunica muy bien, o sea que aunque no sepas mucho inglés, yo creo que te vas a enterar. Os cuento un poquito de su carrera, sus honores y sus premios y sus cosas para que veáis lo que ha hecho este señor. Anthony Roth Costanzo es estadounidense y es uno de los contratenores más famosos, ocupados, premiados del mundo. Ha cantado papeles principales, que si en la Metropolitan Opera House, en el Festival de Glyndebourne, en la English National Opera, en el Teatro Real. Este mismo año está nominado a un Grammy por su actuación principal en Akhenaten en el Met de Philip Glass, que bueno, eso es una grabación absolutamente increíble, normal que esté nominado a un Grammy, espero que lo gane. Pero es su segunda nominación, o sea, su primer disco debut en solitario también estuvo nominado a un Grammy a Mejor Álbum Clásico Solista Vocal. Fue el ganador de Operalia en 2012, que es una de las competiciones de ópera más importantes del mundo. También fue el ganador en 2009 de las audiciones del Met, que también es otro premio muy prestigioso y muy difícil de conseguir. Y es uno de los pocos artistas vocalistas clásicos que tiene su propio concierto de NPR Tiny Desk. O sea, nominado al Grammy y Tiny Desk, ¿qué es este chaval? Olivia Rodrigo, al ser contratenor, sobre todo canta música barroca y música contemporánea, ya que son pues los sitios en los que se escribe para su tipo de voz, pero no solo ha cantado esto, también ha cantado oratorios, estuvo en Broadway de pequeño en 2 tours nacionales, en Falsettos y en Sound of Music, 2 de mis musicales favoritos, bastante fuerte esto. Y nada, también es una mujefa bastante ocupada, tiene una empresa de fitness en Nueva York, de electroestimulación de los músculos. Yo la verdad es que no lo entiendo porque yo fitness person no soy, pero bueno, es muy fuerte que esta persona haya decidido tomarse un tiempo en su apretada agenda para venir a este podcast, pero lo ha decidido hacer porque es majísimo. Así que aquí os dejo la grabación de mi entrevista con Anthony Roth Costanzo. Thank you so much for being here. First of all, I really appreciate that you agreed to this. You're my first operatic guest.
Excellent. Well, I like your all that you do, so it's exciting to be here with you.
Well, thank you so much. So I just recorded a little intro so that we can skip that, and you already know all of your accomplishments, so I don't have to go through them. So first and foremost, I want to ask you, and I'm sure you get this question like so often, but what even is a countertenor? Because I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast have never even listened to an opera. So what is it? What makes the voice special?
A countertenor is a male who sings in falsetto or this high head voice. And, you know, it sounds so exotic and rare and strange, but of course we have all these pop singers from the past 50 years who sing like that, from, you know, Michael Jackson to Prince to Justin Timberlake and Justin Bieber, singing in this high extended register. But a countertenor is this operatic term where we've developed that falsetto, that high voice, that Mickey Mouse voice into a more operatic application. And so it's loud, you know, like in the Teatro Real where I was just singing, there are no microphones. A lot of people don't know that about opera, that it's totally acoustic. And we have to sing for thousands of people with no microphones. So so that's what it does. And the lineage, of course, of the countertenor is castrated men in the 18th century who were the rock stars of their time, and they were physically altered, their balls crushed between stones so that they could sing high. So it's a really intriguing, interesting history to be a part of.
Well, yeah, but to be fair, you have not had that done to you.
That's right. Well, we don't, I mean, I can't reveal everything on this podcast.
We'll have to keep some secrets. I like that you said that you have to train that voice. So that is an active decision that you have to make. It's not like your voice just leads into it, or do you need some prerequisites for it?
It's a good question. I think, like anything, there's a little bit of nature and a little bit of nurture, you know, so you have to have some talent, just like you do to sing anything, and some facility physiologically. But then, you know, you, like anything, if you work on it and if you work to make it stronger and do exercises every day, it gets better and easier.
Interesting. So, because you're always singing in falsetto in this head voice, does that mean that your voice has to be taken care of differently than any other fach? Is it more fragile in any way?
No, you know, I don't think it is. I think that there are specific things technically that, you know, I have to be particularly aware of. But it is the same in many ways as any voice and any vocal technique. You know, a soprano has different techniques than a baritone, but the countertenor itself is a healthy way of singing. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't tire me out more quickly. It's just that, you know, you have to know the slightly more particular ins and outs of how to do it.
Definitely. And does that mean that does the voice develop throughout your career as like a regular tenor would, from like a light lyric into a lyric? Because I know there are different kinds of countertenors, but how much does it change throughout your career?
You know, the body changes as you get older and older, and the voice is really just an expression of the body and where it is. So I think it does change. Sometimes it gets richer or easier or harder in various parts. But everybody's trajectory as a countertenor is slightly different. You know, we tend to sort of say, oh, a lyric soprano is going to get richer and bigger. But my own journey has been that it's been easier and easier for me to sing countertenor as I've gotten older. So I don't know why exactly, but that's been pleasant.
I mean, maybe it's just a muscle that you have to work at, and because it's not something, is it something that comes supernatural to you? Like,
It is now, and it
okay.
feels like the most direct expression of who I am. But
Okay.
I think part of that is because I've spent the past, how old am I? I mean, a long time singing countertenor, 25 years or something.
Wow. Well, I'm not even 25. That's crazy. In preparation for this, I was watching a lot of your videos, and people seem to have really strong opinions about countertenors. I was watching the video of your finals in Operalia, and there was just a comment that was so funny to me. It just said no with a few exclamation marks. Why do you think people have such an aversion to a man singing in a high voice?
I think it's an interesting question. I think it brings out a lot of issues for people who are concerned about gender or sexuality and what this effeminate voice coming from a masculine body represents. I also think that there are people who are traditional about opera and they want to hear Tosca and they want to hear La Boheme and they want to hear Carmen, but they're not interested in this voice type, which actually was the reason we have Tosca, Carmen, and La Boheme, because the castrati and the music written for our voice type was so popular and so well loved that it made opera an art form that developed into that. So, you know, but everybody has their opinions about what kinds of voices they like and what they don't. And I always enjoy reading them all, good and bad.
Do you read all the comments on the internet about you?
Not all the comments, but
Okay.
I go through them and I read them and I see what people hate. And always when you have a negative review or a negative comment, I like to take it seriously and see if they have anything interesting to offer. Like maybe they're making a valid point that I should think about. And then if they're not, I like to think about what my teacher says, which is that critics are like virgins telling whores how to make love. So,
Wow. That is definitely a way to put it. Why, like, do people have a physical reaction to listening to either a man singing super high or a woman singing super low? Is there something there? Because in the Baroque, it made a lot of sense.
absolutely. Why have we become more conservative about this idea that, you know, low is masculine and masculine is powerful and high is feminine and feminine is beautiful? So there's, you know, there's those constructions, which I think in modern society are breaking down. When I talk to younger people, if a straight man, or if a man is wearing nail polish, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's gay. You know what I mean? And gender in general is more fluid. We have many more trans people, and that's becoming more and more accepted. So I think that, this idea that the countertenor voice somehow represents what is an outsider or not normal or a deviation is what makes people uncomfortable, and people who are struggling with their own relationship to gender or want to not engage with any kind of outside presence when it comes to gender or sexuality see the countertenor as an easy thing to hate. So I do think there's some of that, but the funny thing about it is, those people tend to love the Bee Gees or all of the pop singers throughout history who have sung in this high voice. The countertenor is, of course, a more operatic and extreme, and you might say campy version of that kind of singing.
Yeah, that is so true. I actually took some musicology courses back a few years ago. And I remember I had this teacher who played us a video of a countertenor, and he made it a point to tell us that he was normal, as in straight, because he thought that we would just assume that he was this gay, flamboyant person, which I think it's really strange. I think different generations have different ideas of the relationship between voices and gender expression, but it's so strange to me that it happens in the related to the Baroque repertoire, because there's so much gender fuckery in it already. There's so many roles that were originally written for the castrati that are now sung by women, so many roles that were written for women that are now sung by men, and there's so much drag in general. There's so many roles where women are dressed up as men, like even in Partenope, the show that you were just in, there was that. So how do you are you comfortable with the label queer, or do you prefer?
Yeah,
okay,
I like that.
Okay, good. So how do you as a queer person navigate all that gender fuckery? Do you think being queer helps you navigate that easily, or does it make you feel more cautious because you are surrounded by queer people and you know what these gender expressions actually mean in the real world?
I think it makes me embrace all the gender fuckery of being a countertenor more and enjoy it and communicate it better to people. Honestly, I think my voice for me is an expression of my queer identity. So that's easier than if I were straight and I had to constantly hide or say, well, it's not really an expression of who I am. And I know that there are straight countertenors who are constantly trying to sort of say, well, I'm not gay. It's not a gay thing. But I like this voice type as an expression of those different queer identities, and a beautiful expression of it, and a way to give people a window into a more fluid spectrum of gender.
I just listened to the song that you put out, the medley between Parcel's Dido's Lament and Dido's White Flag. That was really interesting. Did that just come about because of the word Dido? How is that whole collaboration happening with them and all the music that you're making and the show that you just performed a couple of months ago?
Well, Justin Vivian Bond is an amazing cabaret and legendary performer in New York and queer icon. And we were trying to figure out how to combine our different styles. And we came up with this show based on a kind of old Broadway review, or something like Julie Andrews and Carol Burnett together at Carnegie Hall, if you've ever seen it. But really this idea that there's high and low, both high art, high culture, low culture, high voice, low voice. And that both of us look very different from the way we sound. And when you put our two voices together, it's simultaneously very funny, but it can also be quite poignant. And so we made a show and an album, which comes out January 28th. So listen for the drop of the whole album. You'll love it. But it's called Only an Octave Apart. And in it, we do all of these mashups of popular music and classical music and find the resonances. But in the Dido Dido mashup that you talk about, yes, there's the funny idea that you have Dido from Virgil and Purcell, and then Dido, the English pop singer.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you listen to the song White Flag and you think about what's happening in Dido and Aeneas, in the opera, Dido's lover has just sailed away and she's so upset that she's going to kill herself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have this song White Flag in which Dido, the pop singer, sings, I will go down with this ship. I won't put my hands up and surrender. So essentially she's saying, I'm going to go down with this ship because I'm not going to surrender to everyone else. I'm going to go with my love. So she's sort of saying the same thing that Dido in the opera is saying. So it was a funny consonance that we found in these two songs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it works. It definitely works. I've been definitely streaming it. With this new project that you're doing, you're venturing out into other genres of music. Do you think it's important for opera singers to cross over into other genres to make then the step back to opera more accessible in any way?
I think I like to imagine it as an interdisciplinary collaboration more than crossover is a sort of older term, which I don't think is so applicable these days. But, you know, opera was where collaboration and interdisciplinary work began in some ways. If you think about how it began, it's a collaboration between poetry and drama and music. Also, there's fashion in the costumes and art in the set design. It's really interdisciplinary. And I like to think about how it can incorporate other disciplines of music as well. And in doing that, we absolutely engage new audiences, audiences who might not understand opera or think it's interesting or be intimidated by what they think is this elite art form. And in fact, when you hear it as an extension and a reflection of the same pop songs you might know or that style you might be more comfortable with, you realize that the material itself isn't off-putting. It's really just the context in which we encounter this material. Having to go into the Teatro Real or the Metropolitan Opera and spend the money and get the seats and all of those things can be intimidating, but actually the material itself and the experience is wonderful. So how do we give people more access and how do we bring in those new audiences? And I do think that this project is a reflection of that and a reflection of the different shades and colors that we can find in classical music.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's kind of the whole point of this podcast. I wanted to make opera less elitist and less scary, because when I was first getting into it, it was very scary. But then I found that the actual material was super approachable, same stories. Like, we've been telling the same stories since the Greeks. We have three things that we talk about. We talk about love, we talk about death, we talk about power, and it just takes on different shapes. But I like the work that you do in trying to make it less elitist and more accessible. And I see other singers like Joyce DiDonato doing that. I see Sandra Ivanovsky and Carrie Alcama with their podcast doing that. But do you think that is your responsibility as a singer, or should it be more on the hands of the opera houses to make it more accessible? Because at the end of the day, they're the people that benefit the most of it being more accessible.
Yeah, but the opera houses are kind of the last and the slowest to innovate sometimes. So I think it's in the hands of everyone. I charge the opera houses to keep pushing forward and thinking differently. But really, art and the future of art should be determined by the voices of artists. So if we as artists are just waiting for the opera house to determine the framework of how we're communicating our art form, we'll always be disappointed. And that's why my career has very much been about creating an opportunity, carving new paths, producing and being my own CEO as I create these projects and ideas, and then collaborating with the institutions, supporting them in doing innovative work to move forward.
Yeah, I agree. Because if we expect companies, at the end of the day, opera houses, as much as they are a host for the arts, they're also companies. If we expect in a capitalist system for companies to push for progress when they're doing something that already works, it's never going to happen.
One thing we often think is that something has to happen on a huge scale to have an impact. And in fact, working in smaller communities and smaller groups has been more successful in giving people a real connection and making them feel a personal connection. And also, we have to reflect other people's stories somehow in the opera, even if it's the canonical works or the works that we love in opera. How does the production reflect other people's stories? How does the casting reflect it? How does what we build around the main stage production in terms of engagement, in terms of digital resources and social media, how does that engage other people? I think there's something called Arnstein's ladder of civic participation. And in it, you see a ladder, and at the bottom of it is things we don't want to do, which is just tell everybody else how great what we're doing is and how they should love it. And I think that's where a lot of opera houses stop by saying, hey, we're doing this stuff and it's great and you should love it. But in fact, we have to give people some sense of control over what it is. So as you go up the ladder, you say, you know, a middle rung would be consultation and a top rung would be civic control. So how do we give other communities some control over the art that's getting made, some voice in what they're seeing and how it's being made? And that's something I think we have to think carefully about. My show with Vivian was a way of reflecting the queer community through this music and the prism of these different voices and personalities through this classical music. So we're always trying to think about how to engage different communities and how to tell their stories.
One thing that you did related to this in order to make opera more accessible and more diverse is for your first album, which was Grammy nominated, and you're Grammy nominated this year again. Congratulations on that. You made 9 different music videos for the arias, and that is something that we really don't see. First of all, there's not that many people recording albums anymore because there was such a boom in the mid 20th century with recordings that it seems like everything is already recorded, right? So the fact that you're doing a full recording of Händel and Glass and then doing music videos, it's bringing it to other audiences. So why was it important for you to have music videos for so many of these arias?
Well, I wanted to, again, engage what I think of as the gateway audiences. Who might be interested in opera? Well, people who are interested in film or art or dance. And so we asked all these different artists, be they Mickalene Thomas, a painter, or Maurizio Catalan, a sort of subversive artist, or famous filmmakers like James Ivory or Tilda Swinton. We asked them to interpret music through their lens. We didn't really give them any specific directives, or we want it to look like this. I wasn't even in most of the music videos because it wasn't like I want to be in there mouthing the words, but how can we see this music in a different way? And it really connected to people. I remember Tilda Swinton's video, which was very silly and simple.
The dogs, yeah.
On the beach, yeah, dancing to Händel. It got, 500,000 views, and it was talked about in the press so much because it unleashed a certain kind of joy. And I think that that's one of the ways that we have to learn in opera, which is very much an art form about being in the theater and in that magical space. We have to learn how we can utilize the digital sphere more creatively. Just posting videos of opera productions is not going to really spark the imagination of a new audience.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I see so many theaters just posting, like, you can tell that they're community managers or older people that are not very engaged in what's happening in social media, and they just post a random picture from a rehearsal, but they don't care to actually make it engageable, which is kind of sad to me. Because I want more people to find it, but I feel like if a regular person that has never been in contact with opera just reaches X Theater's Instagram, they're not gonna think that it's something enjoyable. Whereas I think the music videos that you make are really, really fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely super fun.
I totally agree with you. I think you're on the right track. So keep fighting that fight.
I mean, if anyone want to hire me, I'm here.
I'm sure
So,
many people do.
uh, I mean, my email's open. I have not seen anything, but yeah. What was the process of putting that first album together? How did you choose the arias? How did you choose? Was there any thought in the order? Because I know you end with the hymn to the sun, which I mean, it makes sense that you end with that. But what was the sequencing and the choosing like?
So I wanted to make an album for my first album that really represented me. And I realized that Handel and the Baroque really defined me as a singer and took me to my success. And then when I did Philip Glass's production of Akhenaten, it really changed me and it changed my whole career. So I thought these composers were also an interesting match in that both of them deal with repetition in different ways. Handel more in the form of the words and the arias themselves that go from an A section to a B section and then back to an A section. The da capo. But then Philip Glass, of course, repeats little chunks of music or rhythmic figures. And so I liked the juxtaposition of these two different applications of repetition. And I began to think about the Handel arias with which I won the Met competition or with which I won Operalia with Placido Domingo and all the success that those arias brought me. And as a reflection of those, I started to listen to all of Philip Glass's catalog, from arias he'd written in operas to songs that he'd written to everything. And I began to imagine, I asked him, you know, if it was okay to transpose them or to change the arrangement to be for an orchestra. And he said yes. And so I imagined something like Liquid Days, which was mostly electronics and a trio of singers called the Roaches in the 80s, a piece that he wrote. I imagined that for a 36-piece orchestra, just like we had for Handel. And we started to make the arrangements and it worked even better than I could have imagined. So it really took a year to think about all of these songs and choose, I think it was 4 Philip Glass pieces, and figure out how we arrange them for the same size orchestra as the Handel so that they felt somehow equivalent.
It must be so different working with a living composer like Philip Glass, opposed to, you know, working with Handel, who you obviously will never meet and you will never know if he agrees with what you're doing with his music, which I guess also gives you some relief. So how different is it working on a piece and preparing for a role where the composer is alive versus, you know, a Handel piece or Gluck?
Yeah, I mean, I love working with living composers also because it makes you realize that when Handel or Mozart was working with a composer, they were, was working with a singer, they were adjusting what they were doing to that specific singer's abilities. And the same is true with these composers I'm working with now. As the artist in residence this season with the New York Philharmonic, I've commissioned 2 new song cycles for the New York Phil. And working with these composers, we change all kinds of little things to fit my voice better or think about the piece together. So it's a real collaboration. And it gives you insight into how much we need to interpret old music as well. We're not just slaves to what is on the page, but really it is our job to make it come alive. And that's what the composers always want. They hate it when you just sing their music as notes on a page or rhythms on a page. They want you to give it a voice in a real significant way and animate it. And I think that's what Handel would have wanted, and really every composer. So when I approach old music, I think about it the same way. How can I make it an expression of myself?
Especially with works like Handel's and also contemporary music that ask for a lot of improvisation. I remember you saying in an interview that the opera that you premiered this summer, The Lord of Christ, there was a section where it said that you could hold the note for however long you wanted. So how do you make those decisions, whether it's improvisation and ornamentation in Handel or in that opera? Do you make choices that fit dramatically the best to the moment? Do you make choices that will just showcase your incredible abilities? Like, how does that work?
Well, that's a good question. I think it all has to come from drama. You know, opera, before it was called opera, in Italian, it was called dramma per musica, which means drama through music. And we often get so obsessed with sound and singing and the perfection of the music and the voice. But really, what are we expressing? What, in the context of the opera I premiered this summer, what is the dramatic context that I'm expressing? That will inform my choice. In Händel, same thing. If I'm writing an ornament, am I upset? Am I excited? Am I trying to express? What am I trying to express in the emotion? What do I want the audience to feel? And that's how I craft the ornament. So I think all of the decisions we make have to come either from an expression of our innermost soul or from what we want to achieve dramatically or emotionally and have the audience experience.
Do you think everyone's relation to sound is the same in the way, like what I mean is, when you think, oh, this character is upset, I'm going to do the coloratura this way, do you think it always translates the same way to every audience?
I don't think it translates the same way to every audience. However, I think that intention is very legible. And so when I work with kids in the Bronx, I'll send you a video of—
I have seen that. Yeah. I have an access to the internet, yeah.
So, I mean, those kids knew nothing about opera, but they really perceived sadness. And I think they each perceived it in their own way, but they didn't know the words I was talking about or the ornaments I did. But the honesty of expression is what comes with maturity as a singer. And the more honest you can be in how you express something, I think the more clear it is for any audience and the more readily they can feel it themselves. And that is the job of an artist. In a way, you've put your finger on it. It's not, sometimes it can be too self-focused in that we just want to make ourselves feel good or we want to do what we think is good. That's never the goal. The goal is how I can express most clearly and most honestly something that will be universally experienced by the audience. And each person experiences it in their different way. When I do Akhenaten, each audience member has a different interpretation, but they all experience, or most of them that I've talked to experience an emotional reaction to it. And so how can we create something universal in the sound and in the drama?
I mean, that is the hard part of your job, I guess, figuring all that out and how to communicate. Because at the end of the day, opera is musical theater. It's just a different kind of singing. It's just a different size, a different scale, but it is musical theater. And I know you come from musical theater. You've been on Broadway. You were in falsettos, which interesting that you sing that in falsetto, whatever, joke, haha. But would you want to go back to Broadway? Do you think you could do it? Are you comfortable in the works that you're singing right now?
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to take Only an Octave Apart, our show, to Broadway. And I think it would be interesting to have a countertenor or more countertenors on Broadway. But I think what you said is the simplest way to say it, which is that it's about communication. That's what it's about. And our skill has to be honed as opera singers to figure out how to communicate best. And that's all we're trying to do.
So when you're preparing for a new role and you're thinking about how to communicate it, do you first look at the text or do you look at the music and how it's expressed through the text?
First, I always look at the text because I want to understand the story and the words and what's trying to be said. But then the music sometimes can go against the text and can be saying something different. You know, in Benjamin Britten, a lot of times he writes different psychologies into the music than are expressed by the text. So there's a lot of different layers on which opera can exist and a lot of different things you can make people feel.
Is there another operatic repertoire that you think you could tackle? Like, because you're, as a countertenor, you're stuck between either Baroque or contemporary. Do you think you could do any like Rossini mezzo roles or like Cherubino or something?
I think if I were going to take on the standard canon that wasn't written for countertenor, there'd have to be a really good reason to do it in a production. But in recital, like I just sang one last night in Estonia and tomorrow in Cleveland, I sing works by Berlioz or Liszt or that romantic repertoire, which is a great way to hear the countertenor voice in a different light. So you never know what's possible. And if you listen carefully on the new album, you'll hear some of the operatic canon that wouldn't normally be sung by a countertenor.
Nice. Okay, so I don't want to take more of your time because you're very busy and you have to go. I just have one last short question. And are we going to see you in Madrid again anytime soon?
You will see me in Madrid again soon, and hopefully more than once. So we're working on that, but keep your eyes peeled.
You can't say in what, can you?
I can't, yeah.
Oh. Okay, interesting.
But next time I have something, I'll come back on the show and we'll talk about it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Anytime you want to come back. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy girl boss schedule to do this for me. So yeah, thank you very much. And where can everyone find you online?
Find me on Instagram at AR Costanzo, which is ARCOSTANZO, or Twitter, Facebook, but of course you can look at me on anthonyrothcostanzo.com as well. It's great to talk to you. I love your show and everything you do, and I look forward to the future.
Thank you. Well, it was very nice talking to you, and I'll see you on the internet.
You will, and in Madrid again soon.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much. Bye. Bueno, girls, gays, thems, espero que os haya gustado mucho este episodio. Es la primera vez que hacía una entrevista en mi vida, así que pues un poco nervioso estaba, la verdad, pero bueno, ha sido majísima, así que me ha hecho sentirme muy cómodo. Y nada, si tenéis alguna sugerencia de alguien que os gustaría que viniera a este podcast, tanto cantantes como gente del mundo de la ópera que os parezca que puedan tener una perspectiva interesante y que cuadren con esto, me lo decís. Yo evidentemente tengo 300.000 ideas, pero hay gente a la que me da vergüencita decirlo, pues como es que yo admiro mucho a esta persona, si me dice que no, es que voy a hacer ridículo. Pero bueno, eso es todo por hoy. Y nada, hasta la próxima que nos veamos. Bebed mucha agua y ved teatro musical. Creo que esa es la outro, ¿no? Ya no sé muy bien cómo funciona esto, pero nada, que nos vemos. Adiós.